From Wall Street to Main Street to help small business owners have the same capital as corporate America and give them the same resources as a larger company. We cover business funding, business credit, scaling, business consulting, and much more. Check out the website at shieldadvisorygroup.com. Welcome to the show, The Liquid Lunch Project.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. I am Matthew Arden, and alongside my partner, Professor Luigi Rosabianco. What's on tap today, Lou?
Matt, have you come to the realization that the older we get, the less we know? I feel like we're exposed to so many things in business, but there's one thing that I have not ever, and that background noise will probably give you some insights of what I have not been exposed to. I've not been exposed to making our businesses and our clients' businesses inclusive. And today, to talk to our audience and client base is Maxwell Ivey. Maxwell is a very successful entrepreneur, but he comes at it with a very, very unique perspective. Maxwell is blind, but he hasn't used that as a crutch. In fact, he's using it as a way to promote inclusivity in small business. So Maxwell, with great humility, welcome to the podcast. Mr. Ivey, explain to us why it's important for small businesses to make their offerings inclusive and how they can do so.
All right. Well, I'm hoping you're going to interrupt me along the way because that's a huge question we could talk about for hours. and I apologize for the audio stuff when we were getting started. A blind person doing something like this, usually I turn my screen reader off before we start. So it's the equivalent of when you're giving a lecture and somebody gets a call on their cell phone because they forgot to mute it. So I'm sorry about that.
No, Maxwell, actually, let's start there. Let's start there. On a daily basis, walk us through the types of tools and infrastructure you use to help you navigate life.
Right. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about my own, but I'm also going to mention some of the others for people with other disabilities that I'm familiar with. So for me personally, I use both a Windows and a Mac computer. I also use a iPhone and a tablet because, quite frankly, as a visually impaired person, in order to navigate the internet and get the tasks done on a daily basis that I need to do, there is no one option that handles all websites or all apps as smoothly as the others. Some behave better on desktop than mobile, and some behave better with Microsoft than with Apple. It's just the nature of things and things we put up with. So I use a screen reader called VoiceOver when I'm using my Mac or the iPhone. That is a built-in app that was instituted by Steve Jobs. Many, many years ago, he decided that accessibility would be a core part of his devices, and he didn't do it out of altruistic reasons. He did it because he thought it would make him rich or richer, because he saw the continuing aging of our population, and he said, hey, we build in screen magnification, we make the things talk with text-to-speech, we build in the ability to use motor control devices like you see people with Lou Gehrig's and other motor control issues use those devices, build in things for eventually automated transcription for the hearing impaired. He said, we do all this from the operating system up. We will have a competitive advantage. And as the population gets older and they need these services on their devices, they'll go, hey, they're already here. We'll just use his stuff. So, and then when I'm using a Microsoft computer, I have two choices there with speech. One is called JAWS for Windows. It's made by a really cool company, Freedom Scientific out of Florida. It is a third-party app. You do have to pay for it. And every time Windows updates, you have to purchase an update to your software unless you've paid for a recurring license agreement with them. And then there's a third one, an open source option that's really popular in the third world. And for people who have to use both Mac and Windows but don't have a big budget, it's called N as in Nancy, V as in Victor, D as in Dad, A as in Alpha, NVDA. It's open source and free. And as I mentioned before we started recording, those two options are both third party, which means that whenever you have a problem using your computer, your screen reader, or whatever websites or apps you're trying to navigate, one of those three can always blame the other two for why it ain't working and who has to fix it. So I obviously prefer Mac, but Mac doesn't do everything great as far as a screen reader. There's also
Hey Maxwell, let's start with the basic premise that if we can get people to do good, whether it's altruistic or whether it's driven by capitalist desires, let's just support them doing good, right? So irregardless of what Jobs' intent was, I don't care if he makes a pile of money doing it. There's so few people doing good out there. Let's just support people doing good, irregardless of the reason. So now,
right. I'm sorry if it made it sound like
no,
I was being
no,
negative. No. See, here's the thing. Here's the thing. I love it when people are successful because they embraced accessibility, and that's what he did. I love it when a business says, I'm doing okay, but can I really afford to leave over 1 billion people worldwide behind and not care about whether or not they can access my product, services, or content? No business owner would ever make that decision, which is why I tend to focus more on the whys and giving business owners the reason why they should care, and then go to the nuts and bolts as to how they accomplish it. But you're right. And that's one of the great things about the disability community. There's so few people doing things the right way that when we find a company that makes a product or a service that we have a need for, that is a quality offering, and they happen to embrace accessibility so that we can use it without any additional hurdles or roadblocks, just like anybody else that's using it. When they make that effort, we appreciate it. And we will tell everybody. I like to say that when you embrace inclusion with your products and your service, with your websites and your apps, it's like hiring influencers that you don't have to pay, because we will tell people. I like to say we will tell our friends, our family, our coworkers, and even our enemies, because there are so few people that are doing accessibility and doing it right, and who are making great products and services that everybody needs.
So Maxwell, you're making a compelling reason on why business should be inclusive. Walk us through the ease of achieving that. Like if you're designing a app or you're designing a software, how difficult is it to be quote unquote inclusive, and how much more expensive is it? Is it is it a quotient of 2% more, or are we talking about huge infrastructures behind that?
I would say it would depend on how big a site we're talking about and how long the site has been in operation. Naturally, it's always easier to build accessibility into a website or an app from day one, or from day 10, or from day 100 than it is, for somebody that they've been online since the internet was a puppy. So, but as far as the investment, a lot of this is not difficult. It's not challenging. A lot of it isn't really an investment of money unless you're, like I say, a huge site that's going to have to invest in creating or attracting or hiring a team to address it. Most of it's just a matter of deciding that it's important to you and then beginning the process. I think one of the things that holds a lot of people back in the area of accessibility is they think that they have to become completely accessible overnight. And the truth of the matter is, accessibility is a continuing process. It's just like weight loss. Nobody ever gets to their ideal weight and quits. Or if they quit, they gain it back. It's the same way with accessibility. Nobody ever gets to 100% or 95% or 90%. It's the sincere effort. It's regular progress. It's making us believe that you care. And then the really cool thing is, once we know that you care, and assuming you make a product or service we need, we will come along and help you. We will tell you what you need to do and how you need to do it and what needs to be most important or least important or somewhere in between. There are a lot of people out here who will help a business owner improve their accessibility. There are nonprofit organizations like in vision loss. You have people like the American Foundation for the Blind, the National Federation for the Blind. there are people in those organizations and there are resources that will tell people how they need to do it. There are social media communities of people like me who are more than ready to help somebody understand what they need to do as far as accessibility. There are many companies out there, as you know, who provide consulting services either on a one-time basis or a regular basis or monthly subscription. There's a lot of options, but I don't really think it's a matter of a big investment, especially not for the small and mid-sized businesses. Let's
talk turkey, Maxwell. Matt and I have this humble podcast, and I know there's other podcasters listening right now. What can we do as podcasters to make this podcast more inclusive?
Okay. Podcasting is something naturally I'm very invested in because I've been doing it since 2013 as a guest and 16 as a host. The first thing I think we're recording this on video. And if you're like me and most other hosts nowadays, you record in video and audio, and then you repurpose the audio. And the vast majority of the people who are going to consume this content are going to do it in audio. I think it's somewhere around 75 or 85% of the people that are going to follow a podcast are going to do it through the audio format. So let's think about that for a minute. The person listening to you can't see you. So I tell podcast hosts, approach your audience as if they are blind. And if you know your audience is blind, then one thing you can do is something called an audio description. That's where either each show or with each new guest or every so often when your backdrop or something in your recording space changes, you take a few minutes and tell people, hey, this is what I look like. This is what I'm wearing. This is what my backdrop is like. If your equipment can be seen on camera, this is what kind of the visual appearance is. If you have a pet that shows up on camera often, this little description of the cute cat or the cuddly puppy or the scary dog, whichever. And then if at some point during your show, there's a moment where somebody has an important facial expression or a really vicious head shake or eye roll or something that if a person could see that, it would help them make an even stronger connection with the content that you're creating, with the exchange you're having. Then try to tell your audience about that as it's happening or after it's happened. And I tell you, it's really cool when hosts think about that and they go, and they tell me things like that while I'm recording with them. I did one of the things I do a lot of live stream stuff, and on StreamYard, people can comment while you're talking. Same thing with Facebook Live or any of the others. And then there's been many times where I'm sitting here, I've got no idea what's going on the bottom of the screen, but somebody made an important comment and they go, Max, so-and-so from Detroit said this about you and what you had to say today. Those are things that the audio people will never know about just because, just like the blind person never know about it. With people who are hearing impaired, put the captions on your video. If you have the time or the staff, take a few minutes after you've uploaded the video, because most people are taking advantage of the automated closed captioning from YouTube and others. Take a few minutes and edit it and, catch the major discrepancies between what was said and what the captioning thinks you said. Print transcripts are great once the podcast goes live. Making sure that your audio player is accessible so that the buttons can be navigated to and easily pressed by somebody using adaptive technology. And that's not just the visually impaired with screen readers, but also screen magnification users, people who have to use additional physical technology to navigate the web. After you've checked your player, then check your website. Make sure that there's nothing on your website that prevents them from easily getting to your podcast episode. And most people do that by creating blog posts, because then that blog post or they have a player stream so that people can really easily, quickly get to your latest podcast episode on your website. So make sure there's nothing on your website that's keeping people from getting to your content. Same goes for social media and for your email newsletter. And when it comes to social media and your email, one of the biggest offenses that people make is not describing their images for people that can't see them. So there's a thing called alternative text descriptions. Basically, if you add an image to Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, if you look for it, there's a button that'll say edit this, and you can add an alternative description, or the alt text will just be a button right beside where you've uploaded your images. And if you press that, it'll prompt you to enter some text describing the image for people who can't see it, who have to depend on the screen reader like I do. And by adding those, they make the experience better. The other thing is we've found out that those alternative text descriptions are indexed by all the major search engines. So not only is alt text image descriptions great for your podcast, for your website, for visually impaired people, it's great for organic traffic generation, because it is definitely a SEO or search engine optimization advantage to offer good alt descriptions, because those things are being used by the search engines, whether you knew that before today or not.
Maxwell, thank you so much for these tips. We're going to implement these yesterday. Thank you so much.
So
hey, Maxwell, a personal question. Were you born blind, or did you become blind during life?
I became blind during life. I have retinitis pigmentosa, or RP. I started losing my vision gradually when I was about 5 or 6 years old. By the time I entered junior high school, I had a big drop off in vision. And at that time, started using white cane, was declared legally blind, started learning to read Braille, started depending on audiobooks as opposed to print books at that point. And then my vision stayed pretty constant until I went off to college. And then by the time I graduated from college, it was down to what it is now, which is light perception. I can only see light if I'm looking directly at the source, and only if it's very bright. Like, I cannot tell you if my computer monitor is on or off, but I can tell you if the LED light that I'm recording with is on or off. Understood. Although some days that's kind of iffy, but I can tell you if the overhead ceiling light is on or off. I also have a very limited peripheral vision, so that makes what little vision I do have even worse, because I pretty much have to turn my head at whatever I'm trying to determine as far as the light source goes. So,
Maxwell, you haven't exactly sat on your hands over your career, regardless of your disability. So you've been extremely active in business. I mean, tell us a little bit about how you've used technology to help you run a carnival, an amusement park, life coach, digital media publicist. I mean, you've been really active. I got to imagine you've probably got some interesting tools in your tool shed to help you navigate this.
Well, I do, but I think more of my tools are actually more of are not so high tech as you would think they are. For creating my blog, I have a program called Mars Edit, which is only available for Mac users, sadly, but it allows me a much easier way to create a blog post, to add the images and the link text and those sorts of things. But the things that have really helped me over the years have been the way I approach the problems, because there's only really so much technology. There's a screen reader, there's our digital Braille displays now, there are even three-dimensional digital Braille displays, but a lot of it just comes down to having to be a great problem solver. And so some of the things in my toolbox are like self-determination, which I basically say means that I decide that there's a solution available. I implement that solution even if I don't like it, and then as I improve or grow or attract other people to be part of my process, then I can find solutions that I like better. So finding solutions has been a big part of how I've done what I do. Interdependence, which is asking for help, accepting help when offered, and also the same goes for opportunities, because as I'm sure you know, a lot of people that are able-bodied are very fearful of asking for help because they don't want to appear weak, or asking for opportunities because they don't want to appear egotistical. So that's been a big part of it. Being determined to find the positivity in everyday life has been a big part of it. Sometimes having to accept that I can't solve a problem today, but putting it off and focusing on the things I can do something about in the short term. So for me as a business owner, a lot of it has been creative problem solving, allowing people to be part of my journey, finding a way to overcome those days when nothing goes right and you have those setbacks / failures / disasters, and you have to figure out how to get up and go to work at your business the next day.
Maxwell, you dress like Al Pacino in Scent of a Woman, but we want the carnival stories, buddy.
Okay. All right. So in the carnival days, I would order my stock using the internet, depending on the descriptions from the websites. And sometimes I would get stock and it would be exactly what I thought it was. And sometimes I would get stuff and it would be horrible. It wouldn't be, and I'd have to give it away for less than what it cost me. I ordered something one year called Pixies that we thought was like a knockoff Smurfs, and we got them, and instead of being blue Smurfs, they were all pink Smurfs. Trust me, you couldn't give pink Smurfs away, even during the height of the Smurfs. Let's see, what else? When I started brokering amusement equipment, there were 2 really fun stories. One was in order to get online in 2007 with my first website, there really wasn't any way for me to do that as a blind person other than developing it using coding a website. So I had to teach myself how to code HTML and even a little PHP and a little Java, and in order to get my first website online. But being blind, I had a little trouble when I picked my colors. So I picked yellow for the background of the pages because I remembered when I could see that yellow looked better on the side of a game trailer than white because white showed the dirt more. And I chose blue for my text, thinking that would be a cool text color. I chose red for my link text and orange for previously clicked link text. And I would later find out that the yellow was an ice creaming yellow, that the blue was a dark navy blue, that the red was a dark brick red, that the orange was a fluorescent orange, like something off of the side of a honky-tonk bar. And also on these pages, since I couldn't edit the sizes of my images and people would send me different size images, some of my pages would have several different size images all next to each other. So I was told more than once that my website was so vivid that Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder could have had an argument over it. It was bright. It was bad, but I accepted the fact that it was as good as I was going to make it in the short term and focused on recruiting clients and adding listings and selling rides and games for other people. And I sold hundreds of thousands of dollars of rides on 5 continents because I focused on what I could do as opposed to what I couldn't do. And, as you mentioned earlier, the disability, it has taught me not to, that plus being a carnival person, taught me not to take a lot of time feeling sorry for yourself, but to do something about the situation you found yourself in.
So Maxwell, let me ask you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this carnival for a second. Is
Sure.
this a carnival where you would go from town to town?
Yes. Yeah. We traveled from pretty much the east half of Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Kansas. And then for 3 years during the summer, instead of going to Kansas and Nebraska, we went to Alabama, Tennessee, and Kentucky. We were a very small operation. We had 8 rides on our best year. We had 4 games in our best year. We had 1 food trailer. The interesting thing was, because we had a reputation of being an ethical carnival owner, which is probably why we went out of business, but because of that reputation, people knew that if they booked my dad, that the first thing they knew is he probably didn't own enough rides to do their event. But they also knew that Max, my dad, because he was a senior, I'm junior. They knew that he knew people in the business and could probably find enough rides for their event. But they also knew that if anything bad happened during their event, that my dad wouldn't try to alibi it. He wouldn't try to put it off on somebody else. He would do something about it and take care of difficult situations during the festival. So they could just enjoy their festival or worry about their businesses on the other half of the midway at these events and not have to worry about my dad. The other thing they knew is if he told them they were going to get 25% of the gross, they were going to get 25% of the gross. If he told them he was going to give them half, they would get half. We routinely paid people more money with less rides because the other carnivals were paying for those rides by not paying the festival organizers. And we would do things like we would pick up the garbage. And I know that sounds really simple, but there were a lot of people we competed against who would not pick up the garbage. We would park our trucks and our trailers in organized rows. We would ask event organizers before we used it if we could use electricity. We didn't expect that they had to provide it to us. We would ask them for it. We would help them if say it rained hard. We would go get hay and help spread hay. We would get buckets and shovels and help drain the midway, because my dad always felt like whatever was good for the event was good for his business. Just like, whatever's good for a shopping center is good for that single brick and mortar business owner in that shopping center. And if we want to take this back to accessibility, whatever is good for the internet at large, whatever is good for people with disabilities is also good for everybody on the net, because it's going to make the internet and these business owners' websites, going to make them better. It's going to make them more enjoyable for their customers. And people that have a good time, or at least don't have a bad time while they're shopping, I feel like they're probably going to spend more money.
Yeah, I could totally agree with that. So the carnival business, right? How does that work?
Yeah.
Because we've never had anybody on the podcast to actually speak about that. So
all right,
here's the way
it works in the U.S. The carnival owner, whether he owns 5 rides or 100 rides, signs a contract with an event organizer where they either pay them so much in a flat rate for the opportunity to be there, or they give them a percentage of the gross. That's if you have a carnival. And the carnival owner will then usually subcontract to other ride owners and game owners, who will then give him part of their money in addition to whatever he's promised the committee. So, for example, if I tell the organizers I'm going to give them 25% of whatever the rides take in, the subcontractors are going to give me 35 or 40% of whatever they took in. If I promise the organizers I'm going to give them, say, $50 per game booth, then the independent game booth contractors or the independent food booth owners, they're going to give me $75 or $100. Now, the other option is there are some fairs which are called independent fairs. These are the big state fairs, like the Minnesota State Fair, the Texas State Fair in Dallas, the big Tri-State Fair at the Meadowlands in New Jersey. These are independent fairs where the fair has a board of directors and a CEO, and they take bids where people submit their rides, games, food, other attractions. They tell them how much space they need, how much electric or water they need. And then if they get selected, they pay so much a foot or so much for the event to set up their ride, game, food, whatever. And so that's how it works here in the U.S. In other parts of the world, the equipment owner actually has a land tenant type right to his location at an event that he can pass down from generation to generation. So at certain events in the UK, if you go to ride the Ferris wheel, you're riding a Ferris wheel that belongs to a family that's been putting up Ferris wheels on that exact piece of land for 3 or 4 generations, because they give them a title to that space at that event from now on. And it's a weird sort of thing. They do that in the UK and Australia. But with a carnival, basically it's just like any other business to one extent. You have a minimum operating expense on a weekly basis, and we call that the nut. And if y'all have ever read A Midsummer Night's Dream, you know that the nut goes back to medieval times, when back in the days of wagons, when a performing company would come into town in their horse-drawn wagon, the shiree, later known as sheriffs, would take the lug nuts off the wheels and you only got those lug nuts back when you paid the shiree however much money he thought he needed to get from you for being in his hamlet or town for however many days you were going to be there. So we have our minimum expenses. Some shows are, like I said, our show was a small show. If we could take in $1,000 to $1,500 every week throughout the course of the season, we were good. But I have a friend who operates a huge carnival in Colorado, part of Wright's Amusements. They own one of those 100-foot tall Ferris wheels that, costs something like $750,000 when it was new. And they tell me that some of their equipment costs $1,000 to $2,500 a week just to operate that one piece of equipment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the business has gotten very corporate. There aren't a lot of small operators left. In fact, there are a lot more fairs now than there were even 10 years ago, where the fair board has had to buy their own rides and operate their own rides for their events because they can't get carnivals, because their event isn't big enough to support a 30 or 40 or 50 ride operation, but they still want their people to have a good time. Also, a lot of places have changed the regulations so that if you have inflatable rides or you have interactive attractions that aren't necessarily motor powered rides, that those have a different level of inspections so that people can have entertainment at the small town 4th of July all over the country.
Hey, Maxwell, I want to clarify. Don't think that my partner's questions to you are academic. This man had a choice to live anywhere in this country, but he dragged his family down to the shadows of Orlando, and he's got season tickets to every large amusement park in a 2-mile radius. He's a big kid at heart, so he's wanted to talk about amusement parks his whole life.
Yeah. Now, amusement parks, they have it really good. And of course, this is no different than any other business. The more money you generate, the higher value your company has, the better regulations you get. And it's only been in the last few years, this has changed in Florida due to a political dispute between Disney and the state of Florida. But up until a few years ago, in the state of Florida, every single amusement park that owned more than $2 billion worth of equipment could do their own inspections, could self-insure if they wanted to, as long as they had a daily inspection program in place that was managed by certified structural, mechanical, and electrical engineering talent. They could do their own inspections and not have to pay the state of Florida to do the inspections. And trust me, states view amusement ride inspection as revenue, not as safety. They view it as a way to generate income from a group that doesn't have a high lobbying ability. So being able to do your own inspections and not have to send a check to Florida every week or month is a big deal. And the amusement parks in Florida can do that. The amusement parks in California do it. The amusement parks in Texas don't, because we just don't have a park that meets the threshold anymore. We've got a bunch of regional parks here in Texas. I'd say probably our largest park in the whole state is Fiesta Texas, next to SeaWorld in San Antonio. And I don't think it would meet the threshold in Florida if we had the same law here. Of course, Texas doesn't really have a lot of laws, so they don't really need that help here. But
hey, Maxwell, tell us, just to going back to inclusivity, in 2024, today, right now, currently, do you feel that society and technology has done enough in the sphere of inclusivity to create a level playing field for everyone? Or do you feel that we have room to grow and develop?
No, I definitely agree. We have a lot of room to grow and develop. But you remember how I told you earlier that it's a process, it's a progress, it's not a destination.
Yes.
I feel like right now, because I've been online since 2007, which was very early in the online business world, I feel like right now we have more momentum and more change taking place than we've had at any other point in my lifetime. We have more people that at least have a basic understanding of accessibility, whether they implement it or not. There are more podcasts around the subject of disability and accessibility. Hey, 3 years ago, you probably wouldn't be having me on your podcast to discuss this topic because it just wouldn't have been relevant to most business owners or to podcast hosts who focus on business. It just wouldn't have been relevant.
Maxwell, to be honest, a week ago we wouldn't have known about this. Honestly, with great humility, Matt and I were totally ignorant as to the subject matter. So we thank you immensely for bringing it to our attention. Small business owners out there, I hope this resonates with you. If you can, make your services and products inclusive. Give everyone a fighting chance. Matt, take us home, partner.
All right, I want to just make one really quick offer to your listeners, because I believe in what I'm doing, and I also believe that accessibility is really in the best interest of business owners, and I want y'all to succeed. I mean, if I come on this podcast and don't help you, then all we did was have a great conversation. That's the way I feel about it. So,
Maxwell, I'll make you a deal. I'll trade you your last comment for my last comment.
All right. Well, here's the deal. If y'all see me today or listen to me today, and you're wondering about accessibility, reach out to me through my website, theaccessibilityadvantage.com. Send me an email and go, Max, I saw you on the podcast. I saw you at the Lunch and Learn. And if they'll send me that email, I will review their homepage for free and tell them where they stand. And then if they want advice on improving it, we'll go from there. But I really feel like, what if the people that took the time to listen to us today, what if they're leaving money on the table? What if they're causing people to quit and go home or go to somebody else's website? What if there's something that I can tell them about accessibility that will help them convert more clients or more customers to sales for their business, and something they could do now? So reach out to me through the website, theaccessibilityadvantage.com. Send me an email, and I'll at least let you know where you stand.
Max, thank you so much, buddy. We appreciate you being here. Everybody, that's a wrap of the Liquid Lunch Project. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the show. And make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you on the next episode of the Liquid Lunch Project.